It was supposed to be a night of basketball, laughter, and a long drive home. But by sunrise, 5 young men from Yuba City, close friends, each with their own quirks and routines, had vanished into the darkness of the Plumas National Forest. No one could have known that their disappearance would become one of the strangest unsolved mysteries in California's history. The media would call them the Yuba County Five. 5 friends, all part of a small support group for men with mild intellectual disabilities, who, together, went to a college basketball game and never came home. For their families, it was the beginning of a nightmare. For investigators, it was a riddle that only grew more impossible with every clue uncovered. Before we begin, if you're fascinated by true stories that defy explanation, make sure to subscribe. It helps us bring you more long-form investigations like this one. They were known around town. 5 friends who stuck together, bonded by shared interests, routines, and trust. There was Ted Weiher, 29, gentle, soft-spoken, and always polite. His mother said he had a heart of gold. Ted was the oldest of the group, known for his quiet kindness and his reliance on others to help him get through daily life. Then there was Jackie Hewitt, 24, the youngest, impulsive and full of energy. People said Jackie could be a little naive, easily influenced, but deeply loyal to his friends. William Bill Sterling, 29, was thoughtful and deeply religious. He often spent his weekends visiting patients at the local hospital, reading Bible passages to them. Jack Madruga, 30, was the only one with a driver's license, a U.S. Army veteran. He was protective of the group and proud of his prized possession, a turquoise and white 1969 Mercury Montego. That car would later become the centerpiece of this mystery. And finally, Gary Mathias, 25, a bit different from the others. Gary had served in the Army as well, stationed in Germany, but came back with a diagnosis of schizophrenia. He was under treatment, stable, and finding balance in his life again, supported by his parents and friends. Together, they were inseparable, often called the boys by those who knew them. That Friday started like any other day. The group had been talking all week about the basketball game at Chico State. Their hometown team, the UC Davis Aggies, were playing. For the 5 men, it was more than just a game. They played basketball themselves on a team sponsored by a local program for people with disabilities, the Gateway Gators. The following day, they were set to compete in a Special Olympics tournament. Each of them had laid out their uniforms, polished their shoes, and packed snacks for the road trip ahead. Around 5:30 p.m., they piled into Jack Madruga's Montego and headed north toward Chico, about a 50-mile drive. The mood, according to witnesses who saw them, was light. They were joking, singing along to the radio. 5 young men thrilled to be out for the night. They arrived at the game around 8 p.m., found their seats, and cheered loudly as UC Davis took the win. When the final buzzer sounded, they left the gym among hundreds of other fans. That was the last confirmed sighting of all 5 together, alive. Chico to Yuba City is about a 50-mile drive south. Simple, direct, but that's not the road they took. Sometime between leaving the basketball game and the early hours of February 25th, the group's car ended up nearly 70 miles in the opposite direction, deep in the remote wilderness of the Plumas National Forest. The terrain there is steep, isolated, and treacherous in winter. Snow drifts can swallow a car whole. There were no streetlights, no homes, just winding mountain roads and silence. At 4,400 feet elevation, the Mercury Montego was found abandoned on a logging road near Oroville, miles from any town. Inside, the keys were gone, but the car was unlocked. The gas tank was a quarter full, yet the vehicle wasn't stuck. It had simply stopped. Investigators would later test it. The car could start right up. No mechanical failure. No flat tire. No reason to be there at all. It wasn't until following Monday, February 27th, that the families began to panic. The men hadn't come home. They hadn't called. Their basketball uniforms were still laid out on their beds. Ted's mother was the first to call the police. Soon, all 5 families were gathered, desperate and terrified. The search began almost immediately. Deputies, forest rangers, helicopters, all scouring the winding paths of the Sierra foothills. Then one of the search teams found it. Jack Madruga's Mercury Montego, sitting silently in the snow. But no footprints led away from the car. No sign of struggle. No blood. No clues. The doors were unlocked. Inside, maps were found neatly folded in the glove compartment. Candy wrappers, milk cartons, and basketball programs from the Chico game littered the seats. But there were no signs of where the men had gone or why. From the beginning, nothing made sense. Why drive 70 miles into the wilderness? Why abandon a working car on a cold February night? The local sheriff called it baffling. Even experienced searchers said it was as if the men had vanished into thin air. Family members insisted that none of the boys would ever have willingly gone that way. They hated the cold. They didn't like camping. They wouldn't have chosen to take an unfamiliar mountain road in the middle of the night, and yet somehow they had. Days turned into weeks. The forest swallowed the clues. Winter storms buried the trails. The search was suspended, but the families never gave up. Months later, when spring melted the snow, hikers would make a discovery that would shock everyone involved and raise even more questions than it answered. It was June 4th, 1978, nearly 4 months since the Yuba County 5 had vanished. A group of weekend motorcyclists were exploring the rugged trails near Rogers Cow Camp, about 20 miles from where the Mercury Montego had been found. As they rode deeper into the forest, one of them stopped. Ahead, in a small clearing surrounded by tall pines, was a U.S. Forest Service trailer. Its windows were broken. Its door hung slightly open. Curious, one of the riders stepped closer and froze. Inside, something was wrong. When authorities arrived later that day, the smell of decay hit them before they even reached the door. Inside the trailer, lying on a bed, partially wrapped in sheets, was a body of Ted Wire. Ted had been missing for nearly 19 weeks. He was found more than 19 miles away from the abandoned car. But it was how he was found that made investigators stop cold. Ted's body weighed barely 120 pounds. He had lost nearly half his body weight. His beard growth, over 13 inches, suggested he had survived for almost 13 weeks after the group went missing. His feet were severely frostbitten. His body was wrapped neatly in 8 sheets, as if someone had taken care to protect him from the cold. Beside the bed, there were dozens of food rations, SEER ration cans from the Forest Service, boxes of dehydrated meals, and freeze-dried fruit. But here's the detail that shook investigators most. Most of the food was unopened. On the table sat a half-melted candle. Nearby, a stack of matches that were never struck. The trailer had a propane tank outside that could have provided heat and cooking fuel for months, but it had never been used. Whoever stayed here, whether Ted alone or with someone else, had access to warm food and shelter, yet seemed not to know how to use any of it. With the discovery of Ted Wire, the search was renewed with urgency. Hundreds of volunteers and officials combed the surrounding forest, desperate to find the others. Within days, they found them. 2 of the men, Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling, were discovered along the same road that led to the trailer. Their remains were found about 11 miles from the car, lying close together, partially covered by brush. They had apparently tried to walk for help, but never made it. Farther along, searchers found Jackie Hewitt. His skeletal remains were scattered across a nearby creek, a few miles from the others. His tennis shoes were found deep in the undergrowth, likely borrowed by another man in the group. That left only one missing, Gary Mathias. Gary's sneakers were found inside the trailer, near Ted's body, but Gary himself was gone. To this day, his remains have never been found. Investigators believe Gary may have been the one who wrapped Ted's body, rationed the food, and tried to take care of him before setting out again for help. But if that's true, where did he go? The conditions were brutal. Freezing nights, snow up to 6 feet deep. The distance from the car to the trailer was staggering. 19 miles of twisting, icy forest roads. And they did it on foot, without winter clothing and tennis shoes. Searchers followed the terrain carefully, looking for any trace of Gary Mathias. But he was gone, as if the woods themselves had swallowed him whole. The puzzle was growing stranger by the hour. Investigators tried to reconstruct what had happened that night in February. Why had the men abandoned their car when it was perfectly drivable? Why had they walked nearly 20 miles into the wilderness instead of back down the road toward safety? And why had they chosen a direction that led them deeper into nowhere? Family members insisted that none of the boys would have done that willingly. Jack Madruga's mother told police. Jack hated the cold. He'd never go up there, not in a million years. Ted's brother said something similar. If they got lost, they'd stay in the car. That's what they were taught. So, what drove them out of it? In the days after the discovery, a new witness came forward. His name was Joseph Shones, a 55-year-old man who lived in the area. He told investigators that on the night of February 24th, he had been driving up that same remote road, headed toward his cabin, when his car got stuck in the snow. While trying to push it free, he felt severe chest pain. What he later learned was a mild heart attack. Unable to move, Shones sat in his car, engine idling for warmth. Around 11:30 p.m., through the snowstorm, he saw something. He described it as a group of people and a flashlight beam moving along the road ahead. He called out for help, but the figures turned off their light and disappeared. Later, he said he saw the same group again, this time with what looked like a pickup truck parked behind them. He wasn't sure. The snow was thick, visibility was poor. But he was certain of one thing. They weren't alone. When morning came, Shones recovered enough to hike back down for help. He later learned that the spot where his car had stalled was less than 50 yards from where the Mercury Montego was found. This new testimony added an unsettling layer. If Shones truly saw the 5 men that night, who was a person or people with them? And what about the truck he mentioned? Some believed the group had been chased or lured into the mountains. Others speculated that they'd simply taken a wrong turn that cost them their lives. But the clues kept defying logic. Why had they driven so far off course? Why hadn't they sought shelter earlier, when the cold began to set in? And most of all, what had happened to Gary Mathias? Even seasoned detectives admitted the case didn't fit any known pattern. No foul play could be proven. No crime scene was ever found. Yet something had gone terribly wrong that night. 5 men went up that mountain. Only one, maybe walk away, for bodies had been found. One was still missing, Gary Mathias. For investigators, the case had already entered the realm of the bizarre. But with Gary still unaccounted for, the mystery felt incomplete. Every answer raised a new question. And every mile of that mountain seemed to whisper the same haunting thought. What really happened out there? When searchers discovered Ted Weiher's remains in the Forest Service trailer, they also found something deeply unsettling: Gary's tennis shoes. The rest of the men, Madruga, Sterling, Hewitt, and Weiher, had all been wearing their own footwear. Only Gary's was missing. That single clue sparked dozens of theories. Had Gary stayed in the trailer for a time, helping Ted survive before setting out for help, wearing Jackie Hewitt's shoes instead of his own? Or had Gary's shoes been left there for another reason entirely? The forest around Rogers' cow camp was searched inch by inch. Cadaver dogs, helicopters, and even mounted units combed the region for months. They found fragments, bits of clothing, animal bones, random debris, but none that could be linked conclusively to Gary Mathias. He was gone, and yet something about Gary set him apart. Gary Mathias was 25 years old, a former U.S. Army serviceman, stationed in Germany in the early 1970s. But while overseas, something changed. He began suffering from severe psychological episodes, paranoia, hallucinations, violent outbursts. Eventually, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia and discharged on medical grounds. When he returned home to Yuba City, Gary's life was unstable for a while. There were arrests, minor scuffles, reports of trespassing, disturbing the peace. But in the years leading up to 1978, he had found stability again. He was living with his parents, taking prescribed medication, and had reconnected with his old friends, Ted, Jackie, Bill, and Jack. Together, they found comfort in routine: basketball, pizza nights, radio shows. They were, in many ways, a tight-knit circle of people trying to live ordinary lives. Gary's stepfather later said he believed Gary had finally found peace. He was happy, he was healthy, and he had been excited about that special Olympics tournament scheduled for the very next morning. That's what made his disappearance and his possible survival in the wilderness even harder to grasp. Investigators pored over the evidence, trying to trace the group's movements minute by minute. The direct route home from Chico would have taken them south along Highway 70, smooth, clear, well-traveled. Instead, they ended up north, winding deep into the Feather River Canyon. Why? One theory suggested Gary might have convinced the others to take a detour, perhaps to visit someone he knew in the area. There were rumors of a friend in Forbestown, another in Brownsville, small mountain communities nearby. But no one Gary knew remembered expecting him that night, and no evidence ever proved he had any plans to visit anyone there. So how did 5 men, with limited understanding of geography, end up 70 miles off course? And why did they keep going long after common sense should have told them to turn back? The answer, some believed, might have been fear. If the group had been followed, if someone had been chasing them, they might have panicked and taken any road that looked like an escape. That theory gained traction after Joseph Schoen's story became public. The man who'd seen a group of figures in a pickup truck that night, near where the Montego was found. Could Gary, the only one with military training, have led his friends into the woods trying to protect them from something or someone? For investigators, one moment stood out above all others. The Montego wasn't stuck. The car had been driven until it stopped, wheels spinning just enough to pack snow onto them, but not enough to strand it. Any reasonable driver could have freed it by shifting into reverse and easing out. So why had they all abandoned it? The glove compartment was open. Maps were folded neatly. No signs of a struggle. No blood. Just 5 sets of footprints leading off into the woods. 4 would never come home. The 5th we may never know. Over the years, sightings of Gary Mathias have surfaced, all unverified, all uncertain. A man fitting his description was reportedly seen at a convenience store in Oregon. Another rumor placed him hitchhiking near Reno. None were ever confirmed. His family never stopped hoping. For years, his mother kept his room exactly as he'd left it, his posters, his records, his favorite jacket hanging by the door. If Gary had survived, he would have been 26 that summer. If he had perished, his body was never found, a mystery buried beneath decades of pine needles and silence. Inside the Forest Service trailer, beyond Ted Weiher's body, were other signs that more than one person had been there. Blankets were pulled from shelves. Food cans had been opened with a military-style P-38 can opener, the kind issued to soldiers. Ted's family insisted Ted wouldn't have known how to use such a tool, but Gary would have. That detail haunted detectives. It meant that, for a time, at least 2 of the men had made it to the trailer alive, and someone, likely Gary, had taken care of Ted before leaving him behind. Was he trying to find help, or did something happen to him out there that night? Something no one would ever piece together? Decades later, the Yuba County 5 case remains as confounding as ever. 5 friends, gone into the woods on a cold February night, found, frozen or decayed. 1 still missing. No robbery. No sign of foul play. No clear motive. Just a question that time can't seem to answer. What drove them up that mountain, and what happened when they got there? The Sierra Nevada foothills are beautiful in the daylight, but in winter, they can turn merciless. For the families of the Yuba County 5, those which became something else entirely, a graveyard of unanswered questions. By June of 1978, the search had uncovered 4 bodies, scattered across miles of frozen wilderness. Only one man, Gary Mathias, remained missing, and the mystery had only deepened. The world began to ask the same haunting question the families had been asking for months. What had driven 5 young men, all close friends, all familiar with the area, to take a wrong turn that led straight into oblivion? For the families, grief was tangled with disbelief. Ted Weiher's mother couldn't accept what she was hearing. Her son, she said, would never have left the car. He was afraid of the dark, afraid of the cold, and trusted authority without question. Jack Madruga's mother echoed the same pain. Jack wouldn't drive up there. He hated camping. He hated snow. Bill Sterling's parents were crushed by confusion. Their son was gentle, devoted to his church, and deeply afraid of strangers. They couldn't believe he'd gone willingly into the unknown. Every family had the same reaction. This wasn't just tragedy. It was something unnatural. When news of the discovery broke, reporters flooded Yuba County. Headlines called it the American Diet Law Pass, a comparison to the Soviet mystery where 9 hikers were found dead under inexplicable circumstances in the Ural Mountains 2 decades earlier. The parallels were eerie. Both cases involved groups of people who fled shelters into the snow without clear reason. Both involved strange injuries, unexplained behavior, and missing shoes. Television reporters described the case as one of the strangest disappearances in California history. Tabloids called it the Yuba Madness. But none of them could answer the central question: why? As the public fascination grew, so did the theories. Some said the group was chased. Others said they'd met someone on the way home, someone they trusted or feared. Theory 1, the wrong turn. The simplest theory suggested they'd just taken a wrong road, that perhaps Jack Madruga had missed a highway turn and ended up on a remote Oroville-Quincy road by mistake. But this didn't explain why they kept driving deeper and deeper into the snow when all logic told them to turn back. Jack was an Army veteran, cautious and proud of his car. He never let anyone else drive it. He would not, his family insisted, have driven it into danger knowingly. Theory 2, a pursuer. Then came the darker possibility that someone had been following them. Joseph Schoen's account of seeing a group in a pickup truck that same night became the cornerstone of this idea. Had the Yuba Five encountered strangers on the mountain? Had they been lured or forced off the road? The truck sighting suggested that at least one other vehicle was nearby, and some investigators noted faint tire tracks near where the Montego was found, though melting snow made it impossible to confirm what kind of vehicle had made them. Theory 3, Gary's influence. Some speculated that Gary Mathias, despite being stable at the time, may have had an episode, convincing the others to drive north instead of home. But a psychiatrist dismissed this idea, saying Gary had been consistent, reliable, and well-managed on his medication. He had missed no doses, and the rest of the group trusted him implicitly. No evidence suggested a breakdown, and nothing found in the car indicated panic or chaos. Everything inside was neat, orderly, intact. It was as if the five men had simply followed an invisible command, one no one else could hear. The physical evidence in the forest painted a bleak timeline. From the abandoned car to the spot where Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling were found, the distance was about 11 miles. From there to the trailer, another 8. Each discovery suggested they had been traveling together, gradually separating as exhaustion, darkness, and cold took their toll. By the time they reached the trailer, at least 2 had already perished. The remaining survivors, likely Ted Weiher and Gary Mathias, had found safety. They had warmth, food, blankets, but still something went wrong. Ted's body wrapped in sheets. A candle burned to the nub. Sear rations opened with military precision, but no fire, no signal, no footprints leading away. If Gary had left, he left without leaving a trace. Weeks after the discovery, Gary's mother told investigators about a recurring dream she couldn't shake. In it, Gary stood outside the family's front door, shivering, pale, and barefoot. He wouldn't speak. He just looked at her, eyes wide, as if he wanted to say something but couldn't. When she opened the door, he vanished. It wasn't evidence. But to the families, it was a reflection of the pain that mystery leaves behind, the ache of knowing too little, too late. By the end of 1978, the official investigation had exhausted every lead. No foul play could be proven. No definitive cause could be stated. The Yuba County Sheriff's Office closed the case, not solved but finished. Gary Mathias was never found. Ted, Jack, Bill, and Jackie were buried in small ceremonies across Yuba and Butte counties. The funerals were quiet. The headlines faded. But for their families, time never really moved on. Ted's brother said years later, something scared them up there. Something none of us will ever understand. And perhaps he was right. The Yuba County Five became more than a mystery. They became a warning, a symbol of how quickly the ordinary can turn into the unthinkable. Theories continue to circulate to this day, from the rational to the outrageous, that the men witnessed something they weren't supposed to see, that they were victims of a crime that was covered up, or that they simply made a series of tragic human mistakes. But none explain everything. Not fully, not cleanly. As the decades pass, the forest remains quiet. The trailer still stands, or what's left of it. The road still winds up that mountain, silent, forgotten. Some say on cold nights, you can still hear the faint echo of footsteps in the snow. 5 men, walking together, lost somewhere between the world they knew and the one that took them. Friday, February 24th, 1978. For most of Yuba City, it was just another chilly winter night. For 5 friends, Gary Mathias, Ted Weiher, Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling, and Jackie Hewitt, it was supposed to be a night of joy, a basketball tournament, a short road trip, and then home. No one could have imagined that this night, so simple, so ordinary, would become one of the strangest disappearances in California history. That evening, the group piled into Jack Madruga's 1969 Mercury Montego, a sturdy car, well cared for. Jack was proud of it. He'd washed it that morning. He even refused to let anyone smoke inside. They were heading to Chico, roughly an hour's drive north, to watch a UC Davis basketball game against their home team. They left around 5:30 p.m. By all accounts, the drive was smooth. The weather was clear. They stopped for snacks, joked, laughed, and sang along to the radio. Witnesses remember them at the game, happy, loud, completely normal. No tension, no fear, no sign that anything was about to go wrong. When the game ended, around 10 p.m., the 5 men got back into Jack's car. They made one last stop at Bears Market in Chico. The clerk later recalled them clearly, cheerful, friendly, buying candy bars, milk, and soda. That was the last confirmed sighting of all 5 together. From that store, they should have driven south, straight back to Yuba City. But somewhere along the way, they didn't. Instead, they turned east, a small, unmarked road branching off Highway 70, a road that wound deep into the Plumas National Forest, toward darkness, snow, and silence. Sound of tires crunching on gravel. A low wind begins to rise. It was 10:45 p.m. when they passed through Oroville. At that point, they were nearly 50 miles off course. To this day, no one knows why. Shortly after midnight, a local man named Joseph Shones was driving his Volkswagen up the same mountain road. He was checking on a cabin he owned higher in the hills when his car became stuck in the snow. Stranded and alone, Shones tried to push the vehicle free, but suffered a mild heart attack in the process. He returned to the car, turned on the heater, and waited, weak and frightened, for help. Sometime around 12:30 a.m., Shones noticed headlights approaching. He saw a car, and behind it, a pickup truck. He called out for help, waving his flashlight. The lights stopped. Then they went out. He thought he heard voices, maybe a group of men, and the sound of a woman's voice, too. But no one came. After a few moments, the lights turned back on, and both vehicles drove away. When Shones later learned about the Yuba County 5, he was convinced the car he saw was their Montego. And the timing fits. At some point after leaving Chico, something, or someone, led the 5 friends nearly 70 miles into the wilderness. The road they followed, the Oroville-Quincy route, was steep and icy. Even locals avoided it in winter. Yet Jack Madruga's car climbed that road, as if driven with purpose. No signs of panic. No erratic turns or braking. When the Montego was found 2 days later, parked neatly in the snow, it was locked. Gas tank half full. No damage. No evidence of a struggle. Everything inside was in order. Candy wrappers, folded maps, the basketball program from the game, and not a single footprint around the vehicle when it was first discovered. Some investigators believed the group had followed the wrong car, maybe mistaking another vehicle for someone they knew. Others speculated they were trying to help someone in distress, perhaps the driver of that pickup truck Shones saw. But there's one more disturbing possibility, that they were being led, maybe not by force, but by trust, someone who told them they needed to follow, that they'd be okay. and in their trusting nature, they obeyed. Some pointed to Gary Mathias, the only one with military experience, and the only one who had lived in the area before. Gary had been stationed at Beale Air Force Base, about 40 miles away. He knew the roads. So, was it Gary's idea to take the mountain route? Or had someone else, someone he knew from his time there, convinced him to? Police searched Gary's history, his old friends, his Army contacts. They found nothing suspicious. Still, one chilling detail stood out. When the group's car was found, Gary's tennis shoes were missing. Later, in the trailer, a single pair of leather shoes was found, believed to belong to Ted Weiher. It suggested Gary had taken Ted's shoes before leaving the trailer, meaning Gary might have survived longer than anyone else. And maybe, just maybe, he's still out there. After the car was abandoned, the group likely began walking. Night had fallen. The temperature dropped below freezing. The mountain was silent. No traffic, no lights, no sound except the wind. They followed the road for miles, probably thinking there was a nearby lodge or ranger station. At some point, they split up. 2 turned left, found later side by side, as if they had collapsed together. 3 continued on, one of them reaching the trailer, miles away. No flashlight was found. No sign they'd ever tried to build a fire. Just the faint traces of a long, desperate march into darkness. In the weeks that followed, new witnesses came forward. A store clerk in Brownsville claimed she saw 5 men in a red pickup truck early that morning. They were buying food and seemed calm. One of them, she said, looked disoriented. But her story changed. Police couldn't verify it. And she later admitted she wasn't sure what day she'd seen them. The rumor mill grew. Sightings, whispers, theories of abduction or conspiracy. But the facts remained frozen in the snow, just like everything else. From 10 p.m. to roughly 12:30 a.m., 2.5 hours, the whereabouts of the Yuba County Five are completely unaccounted for. Those missing hours are the black hole of this story, the space where logic collapses. Did they meet someone at a gas station? Were they misled by bad directions? Or was something darker waiting for them in those mountains? The truth may have died with them. The road where their car was found remains nearly unchanged today, quiet, remote, and hauntingly beautiful. Locals still avoid it after dark. Truckers say their radios crackle when they pass through the upper bend, where Shones once saw those headlights. And sometimes, hikers report hearing faint laughter echoing between the trees. 5 voices fading into the night. When the last search was called off, the official report was blunt: death by exposure. A simple phrase that did nothing to quiet the questions. How did 5 men drive 70 miles up a mountain road in the middle of the night? Why did they abandon a perfectly working car? Why walk 20 miles through snow toward a locked government trailer and then never touch the food, heat, or fuel waiting inside? For their families, that answer wasn't enough. Ted Weiher's mother would later say, they didn't just wander up there, someone took them. And even law enforcement, hardened men who'd seen decades of tragedy, admitted privately that they'd never seen a case like this before. Every year after the discovery, the mothers of the Yuba County Five met quietly to keep the memory alive. They lit candles. They traded newspaper clippings and small mementos, the kind of fragile evidence grief can't let go of. Jack Madruga's mother said she could still hear the echo of her son's car pulling into the driveway that last morning before he left. Ted Weiher's mother kept his room as it was, blankets folded, radio on the nightstand. Bill Sterling's mother told reporters she often woke at night, thinking she heard him laughing from the next room. 5 families, 5 lives frozen in time. The official investigation stretched on for months. Searchers mapped every inch of Plumas National Forest, a region so vast and rugged that many believe more bodies could still lie undiscovered. The coroner's report confirmed what searchers already suspected. Ted Wire had survived the longest, based on his beard growth and the state of his body. It was estimated he lived as long as 13 weeks after the night the car was abandoned. 13 weeks, in freezing temperatures, without adequate clothing, waiting in silence for a rescue that never came. Inside the trailer, investigators found open cans of food, but dozens more left untouched. A fireplace filled with paper, but no sign it had ever been lit. A closet stocked with clothing and matches, ignored. The details were haunting not only because of what was found, but what wasn't. Logic had left that mountain long before searchers arrived. And then there was Gary Mathias, the man who had once worn the Army uniform, who knew survival tactics, who understood discipline. He was the one who might have known how to open the cans, the one who could have lit that fire, the one who, if anyone, might have walked out alive. But Gary Mathias was never found. His glasses, wallet, and most personal belongings were left behind in the trailer. His shoes still missing. Some say he died somewhere beyond that forest line, buried beneath years of falling snow. Others believe he walked away from that mountain, never looking back. And then there are those who whisper something different, that Gary never left the trailer alone. Over the years, theories have multiplied, some logical, some impossible. Theory 1, a wrong turn, panic, and tragic survival failure. The men got lost, became stuck, and walked north, seeking help, only to succumb to cold and exhaustion. Theory 2, foul play. They were lured up the mountain by a stranger, a friend, or someone pretending to be in distress. There's even speculation they stumbled upon something they weren't meant to see. Illegal activity, a hidden operation deep in the woods. Theory 3, Gary's psychotic episode, that perhaps he'd suffered a relapse that night. Paranoia or delusion, convincing the others to follow him into the wilderness. But those who knew Gary reject that completely. He was stable, calm, focused on the game and the tournament the next morning. None of these theories explain why 4 men, with no experience in the wild, would hike 20 miles into the snow, nor why they'd ignore every possible lifeline once they reached safety. In 2019, a hiker traveling near the same region claimed to have found fragments of cloth and a worn pair of sneakers deep within the brush. DNA tests were inconclusive. The terrain was too vast to search properly. And once again, the mountain remained silent. The sheriff of Yuba County once said, "That place, it plays tricks on you. Every sound echoes. Every shape looks human in the dark." Maybe that's what got them. Fear itself. Maybe fear really was the unseen 6 member that night, walking beside them through the cold. Today, locals still tell the story of the Yuba County 5 like a ghost tale. The lonely car in the snow, the untouched food, the footsteps that vanish into the forest. They call it California's Diet Law Pass, a reference to a mysterious Russian case where hikers perished in bizarre circumstances decades earlier. But unlike that story, this one sits closer to home, not in the frozen tundra, but in the quiet hills of Northern California. Every so often, people still visit the site. They leave flowers, crosses, old basketball medals, and sometimes a single pair of sneakers. 5 men left home on a cool February evening, 4 found, frozen and silent. 1 never returned. No evidence of violence. No clear motive. No satisfying end. Just echoes of laughter, of footsteps, of voices that vanish with the wind. Maybe the truth lies buried beneath the snow. Or maybe the mountain keeps it, guarding its secret like a promise. Whatever happened on that night in 1978, it left more than 5 missing men. It left an entire town haunted by the simplest of questions. How could 5 friends drive into the dark and never come back? If stories like this make you think twice before turning down a lonely road, remember to hit subscribe and stay with us for more true investigations into the mysteries that refuse to die. Until next time, I'm your host, and this was the Yuba County 5.